So this is our presentation. This is El Día de los Muertos, which takes place in primarily central Mexico. My name is Nancy.
I'm Alex.
My name's Alex.
I'm Diana.
So originally, Dia de los Muertos or Day of the Dead encompasses both All Saints Day or Dia de los Angelitos, which is on November 1st, and All Souls Day or Dia de los Difuntos, November 2nd. And if November 2nd falls on a Sunday, they usually move it to the 3rd. Usually, festivities begin on October 31st in the evening and they end around November 2nd, which is like the grand finale. Usually, the only significant part of the festival is the two masses that are held on All Saints Day and All Souls Day, which are both official Roman Catholic feast days. Dia de los Muertos usually pertains to the last day, which is the grand finale. Even though it's a few days, it's usually the last day that's usually called the Dia de los Muertos. And even though that like All Saints Day and All Souls Day are both pan-romantic holidays, Catholics usually don't celebrate it to the extent that they do in Mexico.
Yeah, so overall, the basic themes of the holiday are celebrating life and honoring the dead, but the actual traditions can vary depending on where you are in Mexico. Like here we have a few examples, but our presentation is more like spirituality, so you could find a lot of that in Michoacan because they have a lot of ties to their indigenous past versus like Region Huasteca, which is kind of more like a party. They have like a carnival and festivities that are open to the public.
So now more of the background of the actual country where this takes place. The size of Mexico, they have around 126.2 million people, over 761,600 square miles. And its history is that before they were Mexico, they were the people that lived there were usually the indigenous people known as the Olmec, Mayans, Teotihuacan, the Toltec, and the Aztec from as early as 2600 BC. And they were conquered by the Spaniards in 1519, which brought in the whole Roman Catholic faith. And then Mexico gained its independence from Spain on September 16th, 1810. As to where Mexico is, it's in North America, situated between the United States and Guatemala, and I believe Belize too. But within our presentation, we're going to be talking about the subculture of Dia de los Muertos, which is a cultural group within a larger culture, often having beliefs or interests at variance with those of the larger culture. And then collectivism, which is the focus on priorities of the in-group and not the individual, or gaining a sense of identity from being a part of a group. Another topic we will cover is superstitions, or the beliefs of supernatural reality, or things that are not fully understood or known, which are usually not based on reason or scientific findings.
So our next part of the presentation will be on collectivism and grief. So from a macro level analysis, which is looking at societies at large, Mexican society has a long history that stretches back to pre-Hispanic times, when numerous indigenous groups were populated, the area of Mesoamerica, which is now where we're looking at the country's central and southern area. These areas held deeply beliefs and practices regarding death, with a term called death alive, that is dead individuals who are thought of having ruined the lives of close people as if they were alive. And so these provide services for the dead and the veneration of the ancestors. Archaeological findings have, during the pre-classic period between 1800 and 1300 before Christ, some Mesoamerican social groups developed rituals, such as the collective offerings of objects and beliefs about burying their dead, starting with this cult of death related to the development of certain forms of religion. So the early Mesoamerican rituals and traditions about death became intermingled with the Catholic teachings introduced by the Spanish missionaries in the 16th century. Although there were significant differences among them, there were some similar aspects. From the meso level analysis, which involves the study of groups and communities and institutions, we take a look at death and grief together because it compromises a social and cultural phenomena of great importance in Mexico. And it's been continued throughout the centuries, and not only among the indigenous people, but also among mestizo, which are mixed ancestry groups, urban low-income groups, and other substantial proportions of the Mexican population. And so on Day of the Dead, the death of a parent, child, or close family member involves complex rituals, religions, and traditional beliefs, and both community and personal resources, which support the process of grieving and the integration of grief. And then, so we have the Dia de los Muertos, which is perceived as a day of transmutation, a change, and it's an inevitable process that leads from a physical state to another, superior state of being. This manifested in the holiday that we have now, Dia de los Muertos, which is a national festival devoted to the dead. And then the Spanish Catholic tradition ties immortality to the concept of deity and to the idea of sanctity and salvation, whereas the traditional indigenous culture beliefs do not. And so per the Catholic tradition, we do consider that both the living and the dead have to wait for a final judgment announcement by Jesus Christ. So overall, the death process, when a member of the family of the community dies, people come together to offer help to serve the family of the dead. Women spend time grieving with the family members. They help clean the house, they prepare the food, they care for the children and organize the wake. Men organize themselves into the Fijina, a kind of collaborative work group to dig the tomb and bury the body, and performing all this work as an act of solidarity. The body is washed and dressed in clean clothes, and utensils and food are offered inside the shrine. And then over the next several months, the tomb will receive flowers and special care. And it's just very important to point out that this tradition, mourners recognize that disease is still in a relationship with the family and haven't really ultimately left the family, even though they've passed away. And so they've now become like what it is, a death alive, a supernatural protector, a vigilant soul that demands seriousness and good behavior.
So when it comes to the intersection of how collectivism and grief kind of tie together with Dia de los Muertos, it's the experience for grief is more so group oriented because it's collectivist. And so socializing for this event is typically encouraged. There's a large importance on families and friends being present. And with friends and family being present, there's far more like social support when it comes to the grieving process because of the socialization. And people are generally more emotionally open and expressive when they're out. And sharing grief with others tends to help lessen the heaviness of the death that is being experienced. And people are generally more accepting of death in general when it comes to this, because from just early on in like when children have to experience it, it's just very open and encouraged for them to like go out and see these things. And so as a result, just people are more accepting of death and they're more open about how they feel about it.
So we looked at one study called Embracing Death, Mexican Parents and Child Perspectives on Death. And this is just a mixed method approach, which was used to explore parent and children's perspective on death in Mexico. Parents and children's death-related experiences and understanding death was examined during this study. All the children here displayed a biological understanding of death, and so I'm going to go into it a little bit. So this study was performed and established in Puebla, which is an active participant from early age for all aspects of Dia de los Muertos, the annual celebration of death. And so it creates a very different aspect for the socialization of death, very different from European and American counterparts in the United States. From this study, we come to understand that about 52 out of 61 children said their family currently celebrated Dia de los Muertos. 43 of them, whose parents reported currently taking part in the celebration, stated that they also take part in the celebration. The children correctly identified the elements and their purposes. And so the children were asked if they understood what some of the elements of Day of the Dead meant for them. And so many of them correctly identified them. And this includes visiting the cemetery, sugar skulls, skeletons, ofrendas, which is like
It's like an altar.
Yes, the altars.
Yeah.
Thank you. Flowers, bread, and candles. And the responses among siblings were very consistent as well. And so about 50 children stated that they believed their dead relatives come back to visit them during Dia de los Muertos. And around 51 children reported that someone in their family put out food for the dead and relatives, and they believed that the dead relatives consumed the food. Parents as well stated that they celebrated Dia de los Muertos as a child. And then from these parents, about 97.8 reported setting up an ofrenda and reported visiting the cemetery during the celebration. And then many parents recognize the importance of death in the Mexican society. And so I have a figure here from the study. Figure 1A shows the relationship between children's questions and their parents' responses for questions related to Dia de los Muertos. There was a discrepancy worth noticing between children's questions and adult responses. And so while a number of children asked about the meaning behind specific elements or rituals, many parents responded with answers that are more focused on non-corporal continuity, or expanded their answers to focus on non-corporal continuity. So this is due to the nature of the celebration, and which revolves around the dead coming back to visit. In figure 1B, we have it shows the percentages of children's questions and parents' answers for all the themes. And although religion was the second most common theme among the parents' answers, none of the children mentioned religion in their questions. So, a number of cases, parents responded to a child's question about casualty or death related ritual with an answer that dealt with religion or just non corporeal continuity. And so, overall, the study demonstrates how children are socialized about death from a very early age in ways that it yields effective and cognitive understanding of death that is very different from those reported in literature, especially from European American children. And so, our next part of the presentation is on superstition.
Uh, so superstition plays a big role in Dia de los Muertos. It's the day that people are able to invite their loved ones who passed on to come back and visit. And they place offerings on their graves and at their homes. That those offerings are placed there to please and honor the souls of the family members that have passed. There is belief that the souls can only enjoy the aromas of the offerings, and if the souls are happy with the offerings, it's believed that they'll stick around and provide help in the times the family members need it. Concept of death alive, again, is the belief that the dead still plays a part in watching over and judging the family. And this belief is taken seriously and celebrated in rituals throughout the community. And an ofrenda is like an altar, and it's placed with offerings, which can be food, past clothes, or flowers that contain strong aromas to attract the souls to come back to the family.
And so, one more aspect of superstition is if the loved one doesn't go through the burial process like it should normally, then this kind of creates and leads to superstitious thoughts. And so, many people in Mexico believe that a soul that is abandoned in this journey and does not receive help from his or her close family is condemned to return to the town or place where he or she used to live to suffer and may cause damage or harm to surviving relatives. And in a study that looks into this, they define this as cosmogony, or it's a shared worldview where it's understood to be closely linked to the type of condition of death. So, for example, different types of death yielded specific consequences that dictate the rituals to be followed. And so, this is something that's similarly done with events on Dia de los Muertos. And so, some of the takeaways from this is that ancient rituals and customs and beliefs in Mexican society offer strong social and cultural means to process the grief that causes death. To process the grief that death causes in a close family, friends, and community members. From the study, children growing up in a cultural group that embraces death might be less fearful or anxious about death. Another one is Day of the Dead is not the Mexican Halloween. It's like it is sometimes mistaken to be because of the timing of the year. So the two holidays originally originated with similar afterlife beliefs, but are very different in modern day. Death brings together the whole family to mourn for them. Males and females have their own responsibilities when a family member